Hi everybody, Frater Mercurio's back here, the Backstreet Occultist, and I'm going to talk to you a bit more about the history of magic and mysticism. So recently we talked a bit about Marsilio Ficino and his Neoplatonic Academy that he started in Florence in the 1500s, supported by people like his pupil Pico della Mirandola. Pico was a master Kabbalist in his 20s, and unfortunately he died later on in his 20s, but he did a great deal to advance the mysteries in his time. So at that time, they translated the Hermetic texts like the Corpus Hermeticum, and they discovered secrets like the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. The Emerald Tablet was an amazing revelation to people in those days because it described the concept of as above, so below, a real occult maxim that what you create in your mind and in the astral worlds will actually manifest. Whatever's above will manifest in the earth, in the world around you. So be mindful of your thoughts, be careful of what you create in your visualizations, because at some point they will manifest and you may not know what you're going to expect. Magic, particularly Hermetic magic and high magic, is a way to harness that concept, those energies, and to manifest things in the way that you want, in a fairly controlled way. So Pico was one of the people that translated that. These things went underground. They went through many networks of alchemists. Medieval alchemists were very prevalent at that time. They developed early forms of science to try to understand the world around them. And of course, again, they had to shroud their secrets from the church, the religious authorities at the time, who were actually a sort of political authority as well. And they were threatened by anything really that was going to interrupt their teachings and what they wanted to spread around the world. They saw alchemy and magic as a threat. So alchemists and magicians were often persecuted, and they had to keep their writings in coded form, and they had to document their experiments and their magic and their spells and their alchemical, changes and interesting developments of that nature in a very careful way. And this lasted all the way through, really, until, the 1800s, when magic slowly and mysteries were slowly beginning to be accepted. So, after Pico della Mirandola and the Florence developments in the Renaissance, magical texts and teachings came through underground networks. So there were obviously mystery schools at the time. There were Masonic networks starting to develop. It was very early stages for that. But those sorts of networks and traditions were moving across Europe. So the translations which had been facilitated by the Medici family, these Greek translations like the Corpus Hermeticum, were passed through these networks, and people began to wonder how to apply them. What are we going to do with these things? They'd been given probably a great deal of secrets that we don't even know, and those were passed on through these groups. Various groups began to form. You had groups in France, you had groups in Germany. There was definitely a form of Rosicrucianism that was founded in Germany at that time, and the father of Rosicrucianism is Christian Rosenkreuz, as many people know out there. And these were the early progenitors of modern orders like the Golden Dawn. In those orders, they were practicing the Hermetic teachings, and they had different structures for rituals. And there were a number of different influences. There was influences from the ancient Egyptians, because gradually people were traveling to Egypt and bringing back information from there. It was only till later on that they could translate much of it, but the images of the deities and the gods were of extreme fascination to early people. Slowly, things developed and grew. The Libraire Arsenal in Paris was founded and began to be filled with all range of different texts, including a number of mystical texts. Pre-war Germany had various different occult groups going on. There was the Rosicrucian movement, which included probably some of the rituals that now form part of orders like the Golden Dawn and other more esoteric modern traditions. And by modern, I mean 1800s onwards. So that's really how it spread. It came through these different paths, through these different movements, and settled into Europe. Scholars in Europe studied it, alchemists, people like Dr. John Dee, who was a famous figure in Elizabethan times. he really was interested in this and had a huge book collection in Richmond, near London. His story is another fascinating story and a topic of another video, but he was the guy with his compatriot, Edward Kelly, who came up with the Enochian system of magic. And this again we'll discuss later. This was something very core to modern occult work, particularly in orders like the Golden Dawn. So the lineage of Rosicrucianism and magic and so on continued. The Masonic orders began to be founded in the 1700s, and so that enabled even more, communication with other countries and movement. And slowly these things filtered across into England. For a long time there'd been a Rosicrucian order in England. There'd been key figures in that who were establishing the early forms of Masonry as well, and had studied and collected these works, but again practiced very much in secret because, persecution was still rife. The church still had a lot of influences around Europe and in Britain. So you could still be burned at the stake or tortured and murdered if you were a magician or an alchemist and people misunderstood what you were trying to do. Well, that's it for now. That's the progression into Europe. The next one, we will talk a little bit more about Great Britain and the founding of the Order of the Golden Dawn. Thank you. This is Frater Mercurio. This is the Backstreet Occultist. Thank you very much for your support.